Joining us now, Byron York of the Washington Examiner. He's the chief political correspondent there. And Byron York, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, guys.
I so appreciate your article from this weekend going back to Benghazi because, you know, what we're hearing so much about the talking points, and it is important to find out what hand the State Department had in these talking points and whether there was an effort to mislead the American people in the middle of this presidential campaign to make it look like it was this YouTube video. I get it. But you go back to the core issue here on Benghazi, which is still such an unanswered question, and that is what exactly was done, if anything, to try to help these Americans who were fighting for their lives and unfortunately resulted, of course, in the tragic death of 4 of them, what the president was doing, where he was. Why is so much of this still unanswered and classified?
Well, because it is classified now, and you're absolutely right. The life and death aspect of the story is really, really important, I think more so than the wording of the talking points. And what we found out is that almost everything about the military aspect of the story, what military assets were where, what planes were there, were they armed, were they unarmed, what emergency response teams, what could have been done with drones, what naval assets, all of these things. Where was the United States military on that night? All of those things remain classified. And a couple of weeks ago now, the House Armed Services Committee, Buck McKeon is the chairman, sent this letter to the Pentagon saying, we're going to have a briefing, you're going to send somebody over and you're going to answer these questions. And he listed 7 of them, kind of what I was just talking about. And they had this briefing, and it was all classified. So it's been very difficult to find out exactly what the Pentagon has been saying about this. So it's really difficult to find out whether these Americans could be saved and what thought process, decision-making process the military went through that night.
I totally agree with you that we need to get those answers. But, I mean, I don't dismiss the talking points as being unimportant because, I mean, it seems to me, and I'd like to know your thoughts on it, Byron, we were told certain things prior to an election being decided by the American people. Had we been told the truth, I'm not sure the election would have come out exactly the same way, or it might have been much closer. One way or the other, I think the fact that they monkeyed around with the talking points out of fear that it might have an impact on the election is really important.
Well, I don't deny that. You're absolutely right. Talking the cover-up, if that's what it was, is actually important. But you kind of have to remember, why were the talking points massaged and created the way they were? I think they were created in part because of what happened that night militarily, and also the extraordinary lack of preparation for an attack. Actually, one of the things I discovered in this, and I didn't know it before, on September 10th, 2012, that is the day before the attack, the White House issued a statement saying the president had been meeting with his top security advisors in preparation for this upcoming anniversary the next day of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. And it was there, they've taken measures to protect Americans at home and abroad. And you think, well, what measures did he take to protect the U.S. facilities in Libya, for example, on the anniversary of September 11th.
One of the obvious hotspots. And we also know, of course, that Ambassador Stevens was regularly letting the State Department know that there were incidents, there were problems, and he wanted more security. Well, stay on it, Byron York. I'm so glad that you're looking at that aspect of the story. You talk about cover-up. Let's swing over to IRS then. You've been around this town. You've seen how these stories go, and it seems like every day or so we have more information. And now the latest came from Darrell Issa on the Sunday shows yesterday, saying that he spoke to an IRS official that said Washington, D.C. told us they wanted some cases of these conservative groups that we were scrutinizing, so I gave them 7. No longer looks like an isolated couple of rogue operators in Cincinnati, does it?
It's impossible for the administration to argue that it was a few agents going rogue in Cincinnati. And in classic Washington fashion, the scandal is kind of moving closer and closer to not just the executive branch, but to the Treasury Department and ultimately to the White House. And the question will be, what did they know, when did they know it, and what did they do about it? And I think one of the interesting issues here is that we've heard a lot from the very beginning that the White House may have set the tone for this kind of stuff by criticizing these groups, by criticizing Citizens United, and that sort of stuff. Well, you wonder, did they do more than set the tone? Did they actually issue some orders here? So this really is moving very quickly, and Darrell Issa has a lot of people to talk to. Another reminder for Republicans that the reason they're moving these things is because they control one house of Congress and can subpoena people and get them to talk.
All right, I got two crucial questions, and I want you to weigh in what you think. Eric Holder, does he survive?
No, I don't think he does. I just don't think. I think we're kind of in the process of this where the White House is sort of doing a pro forma declaration of loyalty to him. The president's pleased with his performance, and then some people are speaking anonymously to favored news organizations saying they're apoplectic about
stop. Let me stop. That was in a New York Times story.
Exactly.
I thought it was very interesting that they said this was a former Democratic government official. Just above, in the paragraph before, on the record, they were talking to William Daley. Doesn't that smell like somebody who was on the record and decided he needed to go on background?
Well, that's one. That's one way to read a newspaper.
That's article. The way I read that.
No, I agree. I totally agree with it. And they did say that, quote, some in the West Wing privately tell associates they wish Holder would step down. So that's a little different. That's another idea. Sources actually inside the White House. So
we should look into those anonymous leaks, Byron.
That's right. We really should. There should be an investigation.
And the New York Times is a co-conspirator now.
Yeah.
And that's the stage of the story we're in right now. And what happens at some point is some Democrat on Capitol Hill breaks with the White House. The administration calls for Holder to resign. And then at some point, the president regretfully accepts Holder's resignation.
Well, watch closely that space. And here's the other one. Does Jake Carney survive? I mean, Issa called him the paid liar at the White House.
Well, I think that is that a badge of courage for a White House veteran? I don't think that what Darrell Issa says is going to affect Jay Carney's future. I do think he's taken enormous credibility hits specifically on the AP story and the Fox News story. I think that's been very damaging because he came to the White House, he came to Vice President Biden's office from being, I think, the Washington editor of Time magazine, longtime journalist, and his credibility with journalists, which is who he is dealing with every day, has taken a huge hit.
All right, Byron York, but it is always so good to have you. Thanks for joining us, as always.
Great to be